I'm so glad you're here to be a part of this. Now, listen, I worked for 8.5 years. Sheila and I served at a Methodist church. Now, I learned a lot of things at a Methodist church. If you're not familiar with mainline churches, it can be a little bit of a trip, and it's certainly for a guy who's as irreverent as I am. So I learned really quick that when what you call a closet, and they give it a special name like sacristy, it's not a good idea to play hide and seek in there, okay? And I also learned when they call that front rail at the front an altar and a kneeling rail, that you shouldn't stand on it. I also learned that one. There are candles that they have that are like, they're apparently special candles, and you shouldn't sling the juice in them like it's some sort of battle thing. And I learned lots of these things, and you'd think over time that we would learn to not mess with somewhat sacred things. But one of my best friends was the pastor at the church, and we were cut kind of out of the same mold, about 10 years apart, and we make a lot of messes together. A lot of 4th of Julys, we blow things up. Between every 4th of July, we celebrate the 4th of July by smoking cigars throughout the year. So you get the idea of our relationship. So one year we had this great idea. We were gonna do something different for Christmas Eve, and so we had this moment in the service where we planned the lights were gonna fade, and there was gonna come up a single light behind the manger, and the manger was gonna start emanating like this small haze smoke. Now, listen, we do this stuff all the time. I mean, like, you have this stuff in the air, and you get the idea, and it kind of creates the space, lets you use the air, kind of see light inside the air. Otherwise, without that stuff, you can't see it. So we brought this little bit. But this is a Methodist church. We don't do haze. We don't do moving lights. But we were trying, right? And so we're piecing it together, like, from the hardware store, and little ideas. The internet wasn't even really big. So we put it together. We got all of the stuff and a hose and get ready. Okay, the moment comes, I trigger the thing. Apparently the little bit of smoke was lost on the idea, and it fills the room with billowing pieces of this smoke. It's coming out. The light's coming on, and you can't see it for all the smoke. But there's tons of smoke billowing. The fire alarm goes off. The people, it did not turn out to be as good. And I got to be honest with you, we drew back a bloody stump on that one, but fortunately at the time I was the youth guy. So you're like as the youth pastor, you're like the crown prince, man. You can't do anything wrong, right? Whatever it is, all the old people in the room are like, he's so great. Isn't he great just to see somebody young like him? I don't get that anymore, right? So you'd think after all those years of messing with people's sacred stuff that I would learn to leave it alone. I've never learned that skill of learning from your mistakes. So I'd like to mess with your holidays. Is that okay with you? Some of you are like, I didn't expect anything else. And some of you are like, what did I just walk into, right? So every one of us have some picture of the nativity. Oh, people are like, I can just see your like little religious self-sphincters closing, right? Freaking out right this moment, like you're gonna mess with the nativity. It's real, it's biblical. So how many of you have a nativity set at home? There's 8 of you, come on, raise your hand. You have a nativity set, mantle on, that's the little manger with the little people. It's not G.I. Joe, okay? So I used to love to play with those when I was a kid. Anyways, so you got this set, and now you've got the picture in your mind, right? And Mary's always on the same side, Joseph's on the same side, and baby Jesus is playing, and the cattle are there, and they got donkeys. If you got a really fancy one, you got little lambs and stuff. And sorry, did I offend you? Sorry. All right, so so you got all this stuff around. You got this cute picture. Now you can pay lots of money for a nativity set, and it's got like grass hut tops to it. We've got this picture, don't you? That's like this serene, like it's like yellowish light, and it's just peaceful, right? Now, that's the picture if you were there looking at it. I mean, I doubt it really was lit with that like sepia tone, and I doubt that Mary and Joseph looked as happy as they did, because I was there when Sheila gave birth to all 3 kids. She didn't look that happy right after, I'm just saying, right? So like it's just part of the way this whole thing unfolds, the thing, and the baby no crying he makes, that's not sin and brokenness that makes a baby cry, that's food and the lack of it. So I mean, it's okay. It didn't probably look like that, but that's probably something like the image that we've at least painted in our minds from this horizontal view. You know the story, I mean, what it looks like. Luke chapter 2, 11 and 12. I mean, these are pretty popular verses. He says, the angels are telling the shepherds we've been talking about for the past few weeks. And he says this, that the Savior, yes, the Messiah, the Lord, has been born to you in Bethlehem, the city of David. And you will realize it's him by this sign. You will find a baby wrapped snugly in strips of cloth lying in a manger. Now, here's the thing. When the kids are born, I remember this. The first thing, like when the kids came out, they didn't have instructions. I mean, I know I'm looking at all the folds and creases. There's no instructions. But they teach you a couple of key skills. Now, moms, they teach you other skills. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. But like the ones that they teach us are very important. How to make the baby burrito, okay? Like you get the piece of cloth and you don't lay it down straight. You got to lay the baby in kind of angle-wise. And then you take the bottom and you fold it up over and you roll that joker up. The baby. You roll the joker up and you hand the baby to mom because that's the person who's going to make sure that it stays alive. So you got the baby. This is the same idea, okay? So he says this is going to be assigned to you, baby burrito in a manger. That's like the Jeremy unauthorized version. So you got the lady and the baby in the manger, and you're going to see this. That's the picture that all of us have, right, of the nativity. But can I tell you something? It's missing a huge piece. And I'm not criticizing the scripture. Because like the gospel writers tell us this scene from different vantage points. Biblical, smart people, theologians call that the synoptic problem, okay? And the synoptic problem is that if you see the same situation, the same scene from different vantage points, everybody sees different things. It's not a different version of the story. It's a different perspective on the story, right? So like one gospel writer might tell it from one place, another tells it from another place, and we get this idea that we see kind of the whole picture from the gathering of all of the versions of the story. But there's one that gets left out all the time. We never hear this story. We don't ever gather around the tree and read this version, although I'm thinking we might this year at Christmas at the Brown House, because this is some killer stuff, and it's in the book of, are all you Christian people ready? Revelation, right? People love the book of Revelation. I can hear some of you who are real, we're going to talk about Revelation. It's the end times and all. It's not just about that stuff. There's a lot more in Revelation than just what's going to happen in the future. The reason we like Revelation most of the time is because it keeps us really excited about something we can't control, we can't live for. So the reality is one day it's going to happen. It's all in there. He doesn't tell you where. Spoiler alert, he's keeping it a secret, okay? So there's a sequel. It's coming later. So Revelation chapter 12, it's a blast. This is a killer story, and I'm just going to read it to you because it's such a crucial part of the Christmas story that you've probably never heard in your whole life, and when I find it, I'll read it to you. Theoretically, it's in here somewhere. So it says this, then I witnessed in heaven an event of great significance. This is John writing. This is the same John in the disciples, but he gets a vision, an idea, a perspective of some things, and this is one of them. Witnessed a great event of great significance. I saw a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon beneath her feet. Now, I know this doesn't seem like it yet, but you're going to see it in a minute, but he's looking at the nativity that you have, not the one you have on your mantle, that'd be weirder. But he's looking at the picture of the nativity, the same scene everybody else talks about in the gospel writers, the same scene we're celebrating next weekend, this whole idea. He's looking at the exact same scene from a very different perspective. He says he sees a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon beneath her feet, and a cloud of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant. She cried out because of her labor pains and the agony of birth. And that sounds like the front of a Pink Floyd album, if you ask me. There's like this woman with clothed in the sun and there's all this stuff. Sounds like there's something weird going on. But he says, then I witnessed in heaven another significant event. I saw a large red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, with 7 crowns on his head. His tail swept away 1/3 of the skies, and he threw them to the earth. He stood in front of the woman as she was about to give birth, ready to devour her baby as soon as it was born. I need a new nativity set. Now, would that not be a cool nativity set? Would that not be, would that be awesome to have like a dragon right there ready to eat the baby alive and like this battle ensuing, This is a totally different perspective. This is exactly the same picture, just from a different point of view. Now, instead of seeing it for the characters and where they're placed and their expressions on their face and whether or not the baby cries or not and the cattle, whatever lowing is and all that picture, we have this perspective from heaven where he looks at it as it really happened behind the scenes, behind what we see. The story goes on. He says there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and his angels, and the dragon lost the battle, and he and his angels were forced out of heaven. This is a great dragon, the ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, the one who's deceiving the world, who was thrown out to the earth with all of his angels. Now, I don't know about you, but that jacks with my holiday, right? I don't know about you, but when I get up on Sunday morning and next Monday morning and we gather the kids around and we're like, hey, let's read the Christmas story, whether I read Luke 2 or Revelation chapter 12, it's the exact same story, but I'll always have this image of a dragon just looming, waiting to devour Jesus as soon as he was born, in a battle, the archangels battling on behalf of, this is crazy stuff, right? Now, I got to be honest with you. I've been a Christian now for close to 30 years, and for 30 years of my life, I've not had this category in my life. But can I be honest with you? This issue is what's standing between you and your life that you have now and the full and abundant and complete life that Jesus came to give us. Like, I just want you to consider this. Jesus said, I came to give you life and have it abundantly. And you might have some glimpses of abundant life in your life, but don't you feel a little bit ripped off? Like, I don't have that. I mean, my marriage is still work. This is difficult for me. My relationships are always tenuous. My difficulties with my kids, they're struggling. Money always seems to be tight. The job is always questionable. I take 2 steps forward and 4 steps back. And it just seems like whatever happens, unhappens just as quickly. I don't know about you, but I see glimpses of the abundant life that God came to give me. But I struggle to grasp it, to see it actually become a part of my life. I get little glimpses of it, but then I struggle to find it. You ever see that in your life? No, your lives are perfect. I get it. But my life, I don't know if this is the case in your life, but my life, we see struggle all the time. Real lives do. And I've got to be honest with you. This is the thing that stands between us and the life that Jesus came to give us. It's an important thing for us to get because we have a feeling that Jesus came to give us peace on earth. Now you're probably going, well, Jeremy, doesn't it say that? And it does. He came to bring peace on earth, goodwill to men. How many of you have served in our nation's military? Just hands up. Seriously. Okay, give it up for these people. This is awesome, right? I mean, now, this is huge, right? Now, it doesn't make a ton of sense to talk about our military at Christmas, does it? Except for, have you ever seen, those of you who have served in our nation's military, have you ever seen peace brought by a bunch of paperwork? You know, or Jesus coming up and going, hey, Satan, I know you got this whole thing under your control and stuff, but I was thinking peace on earth, goodwill toward men, and, maybe I could trade you some space over here or something, and we could, work a deal out, right? Now, peace comes as a result of a battle. When someone has one thing and another one wants another thing, what do we have to do? We have to fight that out, don't we? When Jesus said that he came to give life and give it abundantly, he said in the same verse right before that the enemy comes to steal and kill and destroy. But I came so that you could have life and bring it abundantly. And he said, listen, those two things are diametrically opposed. They run opposite directions. The only way to reconcile that is a fight. In 1 Peter chapter 3, it's pretty great. There's this verse where he just unfolds exactly what was going on. I'm sorry, it's 1 John. 1 John chapter 3, he says this statement about what he's there for. And he says this, but when the people kept on sinning, I don't know if you've ever seen people do that, but, we get it, right? But when people keep on sinning, it shows that they belong to the devil who has been sinning. Look at what he says, since the beginning, but the Son of God, that's here, right? That's the baby burrito in the little trough, right? The Son of God came to destroy the works of the devil. Do you think he came to do that with like a peace treaty? Like, hey, let's just call off the battles. Let's just, the red dragon, we take him back. And like, I know that you came here. Do you think he came to bring peace and joy and contentment and this abundant life by just kind of like influence and politics? No. He came to bring a battle. Jesus came gunning for a fight. And I think we lose sight of this idea because of the art in Christianity. I don't know about you, but I go into churches that are, like a little more artistic than maybe I've influenced or need to be. They've got like fine art pieces and there's pictures of Jesus and he looks like more like a Precious Moments doll. Like he's dopey looking, like he's about 6 seconds from crying. And he's like always got his hands in some weird way that I can't even form my hands. And he's always making a peace sign about something and I don't understand most of that stuff. But we've got this picture of Jesus that he's gentle and kind and compassionate. Now, is he gentle? Absolutely. Is he kind? Without question. Is he compassionate? Unbelievably so. But what we miss in the art is the fierceness in his eyes. The battle that he was willing to stand for on our behalf. And I love and look up to our veterans who fight on our behalf because they protect the very freedom that I live under every single day. But I want you to understand something. That is the story times 1,000 for Jesus. He came knowing that he would fight and then also give us a category to fight under. Jesus isn't just calling you to respect and honor and look at the battle that he fought. He's calling us to participate in a battle that he has for us. For years, I had this completely dismissed. The idea of spiritual warfare was for those Christians, weirdos, you know what I mean? Like they were like weird people and they would say things that I didn't understand and they seem more religious and I'm like, I don't know, but they're just strange. And I'm sure some of you like hear me talk about some of this stuff and it's your first couple of times and you're like, that's weird, man. I don't know what to do with all this stuff. There's a whole nother realm and, there's a realm of spirituality out there somewhere and that there's some influence it has over my real life. And this is starting to sound like, the spirit realm sounds like a scene from the Young Guns movie, which by the way is an awesome movie. But like, it just seems weird, doesn't it? For years, I didn't have this category. And I want us to understand something. This is so important. So there's just a couple of things that we need to get going into Christmas. I know that doesn't seem Christmassy to talk about battle, but that's what it was. Jesus came for a fight. The first thing is, don't miss this, we live in a world at war. Now, we don't want to admit that, right? I mean, there's a part of us that goes, no, I mean, I get it. Yes, it might be true. That might be an idea. I see what you mean, but it's not really that big of a deal, right? We live in a world at war, and everything that you do is opposed. Everything that you try to accomplish that brings you closer and closer to the full and abundant life that God has for you is opposed. The efforts you make to build into your marriage are opposed. The efforts you make to forgive are opposed. The things that you do to build into relationships, to be generous, to be kind and compassionate are opposed. The enemy doesn't want you to pursue those. God died so that you could, and there's a battle every single day for that actuality in your life. And the truth of it is, and you've got to get this, if you have any desire to see the full and abundant life that God has for you, you've got to understand that truth. And this is important. The fact that you don't think it's true doesn't mean it's not true. It doesn't really matter what we think about it. If we choose to go, oh, that's not that big of a deal, or I don't have to engage in it, the truth of this story, the truth of what Jesus came to do for us is true regardless. There is a world at war around you. Just because you're not fighting it doesn't mean it's not true. And until you engage in the battle, the enemy gets to do exactly what he came to do: steal and kill and destroy. And he'll do that without opposition if you and I don't engage in this battle. We've got to stand up and engage something. But the number two thing that we got to get is not only we live in a world at war, but the truth is it's not like we think it is. We think that the devil kind of does these little things randomly and, kind of messes with us. We kind of think like he's this ultimate trickster in our mind. Like like in the middle of the night, you get up to go get something out of the kitchen, and he's the one who moves the end table out a little further than it was, and you stub your toe on it, and you're like, oh, it makes me so mad. You just did that to mess with me, you know? Or he's the one who kind of, you feel like you kind of get things going a little bit, and he's the one who yanks the carpet out from underneath your feet, and that's not the story he's telling. Or we are kind of resigned to the devil made me do it kind of world. That's the perspective we land in sometimes. Like when it comes to this idea of warfare, we're like, oh, yeah, well, I can sure see the effects of the devil because I was not going to have an affair and the devil made me do it, or I was not going to do this wrong thing, but the devil really just rallied and he just took me down, and that's the way it is. And it's just almost this unresigned fight, like, no big deal. It is what it is. It's all his fault. Understand something. If we don't stand up and oppose the work of the enemy in our lives, it's on us. It's not on him. We already know he's guilty. His fate's already been determined. Our fight is ours to have. You and I have to stand up and fight for our marriages, for our relationships, for what's right in our lives. We have to fight for the things that are true and valuable and wholesome and valuable in our life. We have to engage in the battle. It's not something that we can shift off on someone else. So when we talk about this stuff, we kind of have to get an idea of what really is unfolding, because if we need to understand, if we're going to understand what's really happening in this whole idea of spiritual warfare, we kind of got to get the final word about it. We got to get what is it, where it is it. In Ephesians chapter 6, Paul's writing to a church just like this, right? Just a gathering of people just like this in a city called Ephesus. And he says this. He says a final word. He's like, one more thing before you take off. Just one last little idea I want you to get, and it's the most important thing he says. A final word, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. It's so powerful. Look at what this is. Put on all of God's army so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. Put on God's mighty armor so that you and I can stand firm against the schemes of the devil. The problem is that, like, when we hear the word schemes, we kind of get again, that idea that he's like that scheming guy. He's always playing tricks on people, and he's always doing something to make me look silly, or he's kind of trying to trip me up. But that's not what this word means. I want to kind of engage in this deal because it's so important for us to understand the enemy. Now, I'm going to say three things today that are going to sound a lot smarter than I am, okay? So there are three. I'm going to warn you, this is the first one. There's a book written called The Art of War. It's written in the 5th century BC. Again, doesn't that make me sound like I'm really intelligent? I Googled it. You can Google it too. Okay, it's by this Chinese guy named Sun Tzu. And he said this: if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Now, we're going to unpack this, okay? He says, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you don't need to worry about the result of 100 battles. Then he says in the next sentence, if you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you'll also suffer defeat. So let's recap, okay? If you know yourself and you know the enemy, you don't have to worry, you're going to win. If you know yourself, but you don't know the enemy, you'll win some, you'll lose some. Look at what he says in the last sentence. It's so powerful. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every single battle. And we talk about the schemes of the devil, right? Put on the full armor of God so that you can stand firm against the schemes of the devil. Most of us think of the enemy like he's just some kind of trickster, making some jokes, tripping us up, kind of contributing to some things, but not really leveraging that he just kind of one-ups us, right? One at a time. He got us to look at that. He got us to get angry at this. He got us to, to be greedy about that issue, or he got us to think, feel insecure about this issue, or he got us to do that, or we kind of think he's there just to trip us up along the way. But the word schemes is far more important than that word. Now, here's the second thing I want to just tell you that's going to make me sound smarter than I am. I don't do a lot of Greek stuff, because there's two reasons why I don't do a lot of Greek stuff in service here. Because the first reason is that most of the time when we say, here's a Greek word for this, it's usually just about puffing us up and making us smart, right? It's something that goes in our heads and makes us sound good and smart. The second reason is you don't want to hear how I butcher the Greek language, because you already hear how I butcher the English language. So there are occasional times when, see, there's another one. Occasional times, there are occasions when there's something here in the original language that matters to us, and the word schemes is one of them. We've got to get our heads around this, because what he says in the word schemes that's really there isn't really best represented in the word schemes. It's probably better understood strategies, because the word that's used here is methodeia. It's the same place that we get the word methodical. It's that intentional, step-by-step, methodical way of approaching things. The word, I'm going to read this definition to you. It says that it's a systematic way of doing things, an orderly, logical arrangement of steps. That doesn't sound like a scheme. Scheme sounds like I'm going to trip you up. I got an opportunity. I'm going to leverage it. I'm going to try and trip you up. I'm going to try and get you to do this. I'm trying to make fun of you. I'm trying to make things out so that I can point out your weaknesses. That's not the enemy. Our enemy is methodical. I've never in my life been accused of being methodical, right? But there's a very methodical, step-by-step, intentional, deliberate step that the enemy is working to leverage in your life. The reason we need to engage in this war is because we need to understand that our enemy is not just looking for an opportunity here or an opportunity there. He's leveraging the moments, the messages, the lies, the agreements, the stuff in our life. He's building a case so that he can continue to lay groundwork and continue to undercut and steal and kill and destroy. In fact, in the next verse, in chapter 6, verse 12, it says that we don't struggle against flesh and blood. We're not fighting against a flesh and blood enemy, but against evil rulers and authorities in the unseen world. Do you get the idea that he's organized? I mean, what Paul says here is that we don't just fight a flesh and blood enemy. It's not just a one-for-one thing. We fight evil rulers, plural, right? We fight authorities, plural, of the unseen world. Is that jacking with your holiday? I mean, is that messing with you? That it messes with me to know that we're not just fighting. There's just not this idea of he's on my shoulder whispering in my ear trying to get me to do bad things, and I got an angel over here and I listened to the wrong one. It's that we fight against authorities in the unseen world. That messes with our world, and if you think it just messes with your picture, consider what it's doing to your life. The enemy comes to steal and kill and destroy. Jesus came to give life and give it abundantly. We've got to engage in this, in these evils, spirits in the heavenly places. That's messy. We've got to choose to see the big picture and engage in that. And just a couple of minutes earlier, how do we even begin to do that? If it is what it is, I mean, the world is at war, and it's not like I think, and I'm starting to realize that there's something playing out behind the scenes that I'm not engaged in, then what is it that you and I can really do in this life? Well, we've got to start by not giving the enemy a foothold. Now, here's what it says in Ephesians chapter 4, just 2 chapters earlier than this. He tells us what to do, how to engage in this battle. He says, and don't sin by letting anger control you. Now, if I did a raise of hands, right? How many of us struggle with anger? You don't have to show us, but man, that's me. That's all of us. When things get out of control, we get angry, we get upset, we get furious, and we just want to force things back into control. Especially guys, right? We get that. Things get out of control. People don't do the things we want. Things didn't work out the way we wanted. And as men, we're just kind of man, I just want to put that back, I just want to force it. You stop that. You quit that, and we're going to do this. And it's bad when we take it out on other people. It's even worse when it hits our families. But what Paul's talking about here, and he says this, and don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you're angry. And for anger gives the foothold to the devil. What he's saying here isn't just that anger is that bad and nothing else is that bad. He's using anger as an example. Now, that's the important thing to forget. Now, listen, you felt beat up by life, right? I don't know about you, but I felt beat up by life. There are times when I felt like, man, I want something, and I work at it, and then it just wears me out and beats me up. I was in the 7th grade, and I was in choir. Don't laugh at me because I was in choir, but I was in choir, and choir wasn't an optional thing. If you weren't in band, you were going to be in choir, and my mom knew enough not to give me a noisy instrument, so I was in choir. So I was in choir, and the teacher was out for something or other, and then we had a substitute teacher who was apparently in another room, and this kid was picking on me, and I, imagine this or not, I know this sounds ridiculous, but I spoke before I thought. I got in his face and yelled at him. He was bigger than me, and he beat the living tar out of me in choir class. That's a terribly embarrassing thing, okay? So I know, you're looking like, you got beat up in choir class, and you drove a Prius. Okay, isn't that cute? Okay, so I'm sore, beaten up. So this whole thing goes on and on and on. My parents said, okay, look, you're being a pain. This is a pain over there. So they take me out of public school and put me into Christian school, because if you rub a little Jesus on it, it'll get better. That doesn't work like that. So put me in a Christian school, and my teacher says to me, all this kind of stuff goes on. My teacher says to me, comes to me, my Bible teacher, and says, listen, we need somebody to wrestle in your weight class. And today, for us, I've never wrestled in my life, and all I've gotten for years leading up to this was beat up, right? I got picked on and beat up and all this stuff. And so now, as a result of that, I've become defensive, and I'm a jerk. Okay, now I'm just like, I'm going to hit them before they hit me. That's the way it works, right? So he says, you want to come and be a part of wrestling, okay? And I said, well, I guess I don't know how to wrestle. He goes, don't worry about it. I don't want you to win. I just don't want to forfeit, okay? So you just do what they tell you to do and try your very best. And if you win, if you can kind of score something, that'd be great. And if not, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. I said, okay, fine. I don't know the first thing about wrestling. So they take me to this wrestling meet. I got out of class early. They tell me to get down this position during the match. They say, okay, and he says, you're going to be in referees. You're on top. You put your arm here. You put your arm here. I'm like, okay, cool. They blow the whistle. I took my fist back and punched him as hard as I could right in the face. I didn't know that you're like, that's kind of how I think of the word foothold, okay? Like when he says this, like when he says that in anger, don't give the devil a foothold, I'm like, it's like, don't give him an advantage, right? Don't give him, I'm like, why did you put me on top and tell me to put him on his back if I can't punch him? That doesn't even make sense, right? I got suspended for it, but like, because they swore up and down I knew. I'm like, no, really, I am this dumb. So like, it's really a career move for me. So anyways, I'm thinking that's exactly the thing. Don't give the devil the top position. Don't let him have a foothold. Don't let him get you in a place where he can leverage you. And that's what I've always thought of this idea of this, like when you go to bed with angry and you kind of let that go, it gives the devil a leg up on you, can make you feel guilty and do all that stuff. Understand something. He's far more methodical. His schemes are more methodical. They're more intentional than that. This word that's used here, this is the third one. This word that's used here is topos. And again, I butcher Greek language, but it's the same place that we get the word topographical, which means map, right? So the word means, and he says, when you do so, you give the devil, when you go to bed angry, you give the devil a topos, you give him ground. When you go to bed, when you let lust reside in your life, you give the devil ground. When you do so, listen to what this word means. When we go to bed angry, when we go to bed resentful, when we go to bed, or whatever it is, it's not just about going to bed. When we let bitterness and anger and frustration and lust and pride, when we let that stuff sit in our life, what happens to it? It says this, that word topos means a base camp for further operations in the future. It's a military word. When we understand that when we let that brokenness reside in us, the messages of the enemy, insecurity, our anger, our lust, our pride, what does he do? He sets up a base camp. He moves troops in, and he's patient and methodical. And eventually he'll release the troops and use them in a further operation down the road. He is intentional. You don't believe me? Look at the temptations of Jesus. At the end of the temptations of Jesus, the Bible says that after Jesus was tempted by the enemy, that he left Jesus until an opportune time. He laid groundwork. He tried. And he said later on, he'll come back and leverage it again. Here's the thing that you and I have to understand. You and I cannot let down our guard, no matter what the holiday, no matter what the issue in our life. We've got to engage in the fight that Jesus came to wage. You and I have a fight, a battle to fight. I can't, in a half an hour, explain to you. I can't, in half an hour, help you understand everything about you, but I can give us a glimpse into our enemy and into the battle that fights us. Do you struggle in your marriage? Struggle in your addiction? Struggle in that problem, that relationship that seems to just come back and haunt you? Stop it and break the foothold. Tear down that wall and begin to live out a life that fights the battle against the enemy. I know it's scary, right? I mean, the whole idea of it is terrifying. The idea that there's a whole nother world, that there's a heavenly realm, that we don't fight against flesh and blood, that we fight against principalities and rulers and authorities and this darkness. I mean, it's terrifying, isn't it? I mean, when I begin to really think about the fact that it's true and it's not just something we talk about for half an hour and go grab some lunch, when I begin to think about the fact that darkness is there and that it's my responsibility, my calling, not to believe in Jesus and then behave until he shows up one day, but to believe in Jesus and then engage. When I realize that Jesus calls me to engage in this battle, it's terrible. It's scary. But I serve the cause of the gospel. The story of Jesus isn't one of Jesus who came to politic for some sort of, agreement for peace and joy. He came to bring a fight, to destroy the works of the devil, to engage darkness and make it tremble. Let's stand and sing.